The Clarity Act just cleared its biggest hurdle. A Republican senator and a Democratic senator confirmed they have an agreement in principle with the White House on the stablecoin yield language that stalled crypto legislation for months. The compromise is done, the banks got their concession, and the bill could now move to a Senate vote within weeks. Let me say that again, because the significance of this moment deserves to land properly. The single provision that killed the first markup attempt in January, the stablecoin yield clause that JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo spent 3 months lobbying against, has been resolved. Bipartisan agreement, White House sign-off. The obstruction is over. Senator Cynthia Lummis posted it directly. President Trump pledged to make America the digital asset capital of the world. The Clarity Act is how we make that happen. Let's get it done once and for all. That is not cautious political language. That is a senator with scheduling influence calling for immediate action on the most important piece of digital asset legislation in American history. In the same week that Garlinghouse posted a photo standing next to Tim Scott, the chairman of the Banking Committee. In the same week the Senate returned from recess. In the same week the markup window opened. Every signal is pointing in the same direction, and the community needs to understand what happens next. This is not financial advice. I am sharing publicly available information for educational purposes. Always do your own research. Before we get into it, drop compromise in the comments. If the stablecoin yield deal resolution just changed your probability estimate for passage. Drop finally if you've been waiting months for this specific obstruction to clear. Drop cautious if you've been burned before and need to see the actual vote before you believe it. All 3 responses are valid. I want to see the honest range of conviction. Welcome back. I am the Calm Analyst. Around here, we track the political mechanics that move markets before the markets move. Today, we're breaking down the compromise, what it means for the markup timeline, what happens in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and why every catalyst we've been tracking for months now sits behind a gate that just opened. Let's get into it. Let me walk through exactly what happened, because the details of this compromise matter for understanding why the bill can now advance. The core dispute was simple but structurally important. Crypto platforms like Coinbase wanted the ability to pay yield on stablecoin deposits, interest that users could earn by holding USDC or other stablecoins on their platforms. The banks viewed this as an existential threat. If you can earn 4 to 5% holding stablecoins on Coinbase, why would you keep money in a checking account earning nothing? The banks saw yield-bearing stablecoins as a direct competitor to their deposit base, and they have enormous lobbying power. JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo spent the entire first quarter lobbying against this single provision. They held the entire Clarity Act hostage for one clause, and it worked. The January markup was killed. The bill stalled in committee. 3 months of legislative momentum evaporated because 3 banks didn't want Coinbase paying interest. The compromise reached this week resolves the dispute. The revised language prohibits passive yield on stablecoin balances, but may allow some form of loyalty rewards or point structures that don't directly compete with bank deposits. The precise language is still being finalized with industry stakeholders. The senator said they need to vet it with the industry because they're part of the deal, but the structural obstruction is gone. The banks no longer have a clean reason to block the bill. The White House is on board. Both parties have a senator publicly confirming the agreement. The path to markup is clear for the first time since the bill entered the Senate. Katie Haun, the founder of Haun Ventures, described the situation on Bloomberg. There's a compromise in the works in the Senate Banking Committee. She was cautiously optimistic, and she noted the critical timing. While there are 7 months until midterm elections, Congress only has 3 working months. They need to move very deliberately after Easter recess. 3 working months, and the recess just ended. The clock is running. If the compromise resolution just moved the Clarity Act from stalled to likely in your mental model, smash that like button, because this is the political development that everything else has been waiting on. Now let me frame what happens next in precise sequence, because the legislative process has specific steps and the community needs to understand each one. Step 1, the compromise text gets finalized with industry stakeholders. This is happening right now. Coinbase, major banks, and crypto firms are reviewing the language. This is the standard pre-markup process. Restricted access, closed-door review, final negotiation on details. Step 2, Chairman Tim Scott schedules the markup. This is the single most important near-term event. A confirmed markup date moves XRP before the vote happens. The market price's probability shifts, not confirmed outcomes. The scheduling announcement is the first signal. Step 3. The Senate Banking Committee holds the markup. Members debate, propose amendments, and vote to advance the bill out of committee, Given the bipartisan compromise and the House's 294 to 134 precedent, advancement is likely but not guaranteed. DeFi provisions, token classification details, and tokenization treatment are still being reviewed. Step 4. The bill moves to the Senate floor for a full vote. This requires floor time, which is the scarce resource that midterm politics threatens to consume. If the bill clears committee in late April, floor time in May is possible before the Memorial Day recess on May 21st. Step 5. Conference committee reconciles the Senate and House versions. Then the final bill goes to the president's desk. Given Trump's public statements on making America the digital asset capital of the world and his 18-month policy sequence supporting crypto, signature is essentially guaranteed. The entire process from markup to signature could take 4 to 8 weeks if there are no additional delays. That puts final passage somewhere between late May and early July. Bloomberg sources suggesting July align with this timeline. The question for XRP holders is not whether the bill passes eventually. The compromise resolution makes passage highly likely. The question is whether it passes fast enough to beat the midterm political window, and that depends entirely on Tim Scott scheduling the markup in the next 2 weeks. Comment below. Now that the compromise is done, what's your timeline prediction for passage? Type April if you think the markup happens this month. Type May if you think committee vote in May. Type July if you think Bloomberg's July estimate is correct. Type 2027 if you think it still stalls. I want the honest range. Now let me connect this to Polymarket, because the prediction market data gives us real-time probability assessment with real money behind it. Polymarket odds on the Clarity Act being signed into law in 2026 have been trending upward. In the last 7 days, the probability has increased. When real money bets on legislative outcomes shift upward, it means the informed participants closest to the process are seeing positive signals. Garlinghouse puts passage at 80 to 90%. Polymarket sits around 72%. Katie Hahn is cautiously optimistic. Galaxy Digital's warning remains: clear committee by end of April, or likely dead for 2026. The compromise resolution addresses Galaxy Digital's primary concern. The stablecoin dispute was the obstacle. The obstacle is removed. The remaining issues are real but smaller in scope. DeFi provisions and token classification are technical details that don't carry the same political weight as the yield dispute. The probability has meaningfully shifted. Not to 100%, but from the 50-60% range where it sat during the stall to the 70-80% range where it sits now. And in markets, that probability shift produces price movement before the outcome is confirmed. Now let me explain what the Clarity Act unlocks, because this is why the community has been focused on this bill for months. It's not about one piece of legislation. It's about the cascade of capital that legislation releases. Without the Clarity Act, the commodity classification is an administrative interpretation, reversible by a future SEC chair with a memo. Conservative institutional allocators cannot build permanent mandates on reversible guidance. They stay on the sidelines. With the Clarity Act, XRP's commodity status becomes permanent federal law, not reversible, not subject to interpretation, law. And every institutional process that requires statutory certainty, pension fund mandates, insurance company allocations, sovereign wealth fund frameworks, registered advisor model portfolios, unlocks. Standard Chartered projects $4 to $8 billion in new XRP ETF inflows as a direct result of permanent statutory classification. The 7 ETFs currently hold about $1 billion, $4 to $8 billion entering a market where exchange reserves are at multi-year lows and the free float is compressing creates amplified price response. The 401k rules legal foundation becomes ironclad with statutory classification. Target date fund managers can build crypto allocations knowing the regulatory framework is permanent. The $10.1 trillion in retirement savings gets a clear, legally defensible pathway to XRP exposure. Ripple Treasury's 2100 corporate clients receive the signal to commit to on-chain settlement. The Genius Act implementation through the FDIC gives them the stablecoin framework. The Clarity Act gives them the digital asset framework. Together, the $13 trillion payment pipeline has every regulatory prerequisite to begin migrating to blockchain settlement. And the banks themselves, the same banks that lobbied against the stablecoin yield provision, will be the ones using the framework. Because the Clarity Act doesn't just regulate crypto firms. It provides the rules under which banks themselves can engage with digital assets, tokenized securities, and blockchain settlement at scale. The banks fought the yield provision because it threatened their deposit base. They didn't fight the rest of the bill because the rest of the bill helps them. Clear rules for tokenized securities. Framework for digital asset custody. Standards for blockchain settlement. The banks need these rules as much as the crypto firms do. That's the irony. The institutions that delayed the bill for 3 months over one provision are going to be among the biggest beneficiaries of everything else in the legislation. Subscribe right now, hit the bell, drop it in the comments, because the Clarity Act compromise resolution is the most significant political development for XRP since the commodity classification on March 17th. And the markup scheduling announcement could come any day in the next 2 weeks. We cover every development in real time. Now let me address Michael Saylor's latest comments, because they provide useful context for how to think about conviction during accumulation phases. Saylor described his Bitcoin strategy as a ratchet. Keep buying, keep turning the crank. Massive leverage compounds over time. And he's not just saying it, he's doing it. Strategy now holds approximately 4% of Bitcoin's total supply. The principle applies to XRP at a smaller scale, but with the same logic. The accumulation phase, when prices are boring, when the market is sideways, when everyone is frustrated, is when the ratchet turns. Each purchase at 137 improves your position on the rich list. Each token added to your wallet is a token that won't be available at this price once the catalysts fire. The people who accumulate during the boring phases are the ones positioned when the explosive phases arrive. That's not motivation, that's the documented pattern of every previous cycle, and the boring phase has a defined endpoint now. The compromise is done. The markup window is open. The Senate is in session. The signals are aligned. The gate that's been holding back institutional capital is opening. Let me bring this all together, because the picture right now is the clearest it has been all year. The stablecoin yield compromise is done. Bipartisan agreement. White House sign-off. The single biggest obstruction to the Clarity Act has been removed. Senator Lummis is calling for immediate action. Garlinghouse is meeting with Tim Scott. The SEC roundtable on April 16th addresses implementation. Polymarket odds are trending up. Katie Haun is cautiously optimistic. The markup window is open. Behind the bill sits everything we've been building toward. $13 trillion in payment pipeline. SWIFT certification. 13,000 connected banks. 7 ETFs. $1 billion in custody. Goldman Sachs at $153 million, BlackRock using RLUSD, DTCC participant directory, OCC charter, FDIC tokenized deposit ruling, 401k pathway, commodity classification, global M2 expansion, carry trade unwind driving institutional demand for efficient settlement, AI economy needing censorship-resistant rails, quantum secure architecture, permission domains live, smart escrows deployed, 300 institutions in 45 countries. All of it sits behind one gate. And that gate just had its lock removed. The next 2 to 3 weeks determine whether the gate opens now or later, not whether it opens. The compromise ensures it opens eventually. The question is timing, and timing determines whether the repricing is concentrated and explosive or gradual and extended. Either way, the infrastructure is permanent. The regulatory framework is materializing, the institutional demand is documented, and XRP at 137 with the compromise done and the markup window open is the most asymmetric risk-reward setup this asset has offered since the SEC lawsuit was filed. Price is a distraction. Value is the reality. Structure is what matters. And the political structure just shifted decisively in XRP's favor with the compromise resolution. The gate is unlocked. The question is how fast it swings open. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. Remember, haste leads to loss, while calm analysis leads to victory. Comment calm analyst below. Let me see who's positioned for what the next 2 weeks bring. And share this with someone who thinks nothing is happening with crypto legislation. The compromise is done. The markup window is open. And every signal from Washington says the moment to act is now. Compromise checked. Let's see what happens next week. Like, subscribe, notifications on. I'll see you in the next one. Stay patient, stay rational. And as we always do, we don't wait for the future. We plan for it. Peace.